to me, I think that free speech is the ability to say and do as you think and freely express your ideological beliefs, regardless of any fear of any external actor imposing their will upon you. But the caveat to free speech that I don't think a lot of people stress is that while we can't place a legal limitation on free speech, it is incumbent upon us to exercise the right in a productive and effective manner. We shouldn't use free speech just as an end. Free speech needs to be a means towards a constructive end.
Why do you care? Why do you care?
Why do I care about free speech?
Yeah, why?
I think that free speech is fundamental to any free society. I think that it's essential for democratic sustainability. I think that free speech matters because it gives the voice to the least powerless people in society. Any group of individuals you look at in the United States today, regardless of how marginalized they are, the key thing that is united across all groups is that they all have a voice. And free speech is that access. That's their card to access democracy. Now, yes, everyone can access democracy in different ways, and there's marginalization in that sense. But it is fundamentally what makes us all equal in a democracy.
Did you grow up in one of these homes where this kind of stuff was discussed? Did it come to you as an epiphany? I mean, what is your background that caused you to see this as an issue?
Right. So my parents are immigrants, so they came here. We frankly didn't have time to discuss politics, and that's actually the case with a lot of families in the United States. It's, politics doesn't really affect you. And so it really seems like an alien thing. What happened with the Trump election was it really brought politics home to a lot of people. So in my case, it was something that I had to explore. In high school, I started doing debate, and it really exposed me to a lot of different students, different ideas. And then when I came to college, really the launching point was the 2016 election when, I saw students hopeless, I saw violence, I saw, people literally screaming down the streets, right? Especially it's Berkeley. And that really got me thinking that, politics is affecting these people in such vivid ways. There has to be some way that I can be involved. And I think that campus activism and engaging politics is one of the fundamental civic responsibilities of our society. If democracy only can sustain itself if people are, putting something back into it. And so I really don't have a lot of tolerance for apathy. And so I try to, be as politically active as possible in a constructive way. So let me give you a story. So I was, 1 year ago, actually in January, I was at a panel. There was a Holocaust survivor, and there was the Holocaust survivor's daughter, and then myself and this man named Ira Glasser, who was the president of the ACLU. And I think 30, 40 years ago. And the topic was the Nazis had marched through Skokie, Illinois in, I think, 60s or 70s. And Ira and I essentially were advocating that, regardless, in front of a Holocaust survivor who was deeply affected by this issue, that regardless of what the speech is, we have to protect free speech in every instance. And the reason why it's such an important issue for me is because restricting free speech or placing any sort of ban on it is like poison gas. It can be easily used against you as well. If we restrict someone that we, hate or we're repulsed by, that exact restriction, the way the Constitution is worded, can be used against us legally. So with that frame in mind, for me, I always recognize that regardless of what the other person's saying or what they're about, I have to temper my own emotional feelings and connect with their value. Why are they saying what they're saying? It's not about their argument. It's not about responding to their temper or to exactly the substance, but it's about responding to what's behind that argument. And by getting at people's values and by talking at a value level, you really can get somewhere. Now, this is not to say that you should go talk with Nazis, right? But the frame is that, even in the most abhorrent circumstances, the reason why our legal system has defended free speech is not because it's marginalized or it's excluding people. It's in fact preserving those protections so that excluded people can access politics. If you place a restriction on free speech right now, right, and if you let your temper get the better of you, that restriction can be used against an LGBTQ group that's active in San Francisco. There's nothing stopping that. So we have to be smart politically, and we have to recognize that when we don't like the speech, we either respond with better speech, because hate speech fundamentally is stupid. And if you can't debate and beat hate speech, right, either you have a problem or it's just not worth it. And that's the second part. The way you beat hate speech is you just don't give it an audience. Don't give it the fuel right, that that gets people going. The way that someone like Milo Yiannopoulos gets a crowd is he gets a reaction out of you, right? So we have to be really smart in how we are engaging politics right now, because really I think that democracy's right now American democracy is really uncertain. My feeling is that government is only as good as we make it to be. Our government is a product of our actions. We elect our officials. So one of the things that I find that's very hypocritical in society today is when people say that they have no faith in government, they have to recognize that they have the ability to change that. Every election is an opportunity to restore your faith in government, right? And be active, be politically vocal to see the change that you want to see in that government. That being said, I am very faithful in our government. People always say that they're as hopeful as they've ever been. That's false, but I'm very hopeful in our government because I see that there's very active people, and there's a lot of young people right now in our country that are not succumbing to those same polarizing divisions that we see, amongst the adults right now. And that's why BridgeUSA, I think, is particularly relevant, is what we try to do is we invest in the future of democracy. It's about training the leaders of tomorrow on today's college campuses. Right now, when everyone talks about political polarization, they only look at it now, in the status quo. The fact is that polarization and division has been cyclical. It'll happen 30 years, it happened 30 years ago and it'll happen 30 years in the future. The key is if we're, rather than reacting, are we being proactive to that issue? So Bridge really tries to train today's, students in those responsible norms of constructive dialogue, of constructive engagement and tolerance, so that the leaders of tomorrow are trained in those skills from now. If we don't attempt to inculcate that culture right now, you can't expect, the future leadership to suddenly change on a whim. And that's what we're seeing right now. We often look at politics not as a futuristic thing. We don't try to prepare for politics. We try to just react to it. And when you're reactionary methods fail. Because that's when you react to politics, that's when you see things like, people resorting to violence, you see hopelessness, you see a breakdown of norms. So it's really important to recognize that we have to invest in the future.
How do you train students
Yeah.
in the direction you've just proposed? How
Yeah.
do you train them?
So the fact of the matter is that things like tolerance are human nature. They're innate within us. It's just about bringing those values to the top. So you don't have to train someone to be tolerant. You just have to help them recognize what tolerance looks like. Humans are very empathetic and social creatures. One of the people that helps Bridge, his name is Jonathan Haidt. He's a prominent moral psychologist, and he's written about this several times. And he was just on Bill Maher last week, and he talks about this concept that we all share these values of tolerance, fairness, caring, kindness. Humans are innately decent creatures. What we try to do is we try to help students, engage in these discussions. We try to demonstrate to them what good moral leadership looks like by bringing speakers to campus that are productive, by helping them engage in dialogue. Believe it or not, there aren't actually a lot of spaces on today's college campuses where students can have these dialogues. Classrooms exist, but those don't allow free engagement. When students don't have the opportunity, or when anyone, frankly, when a person doesn't have the opportunity to practice a certain skill, that skill recedes over time. Bridges tries to, train that skill over, make sure that skill is in constant practice. Because that skill exists within us, that ability to constructively engage one another. It's just about honing that skill over time. People are scared. When you have minorities that are very loud, they sort of paint the entire majority as that. And when there is no vehicle for expressing your tolerance, when there's no vehicle for being politically engaged in a constructive manner, you have no idea how to do it. So Bridge is about providing that vehicle and facilitating that constructive engagement. So it's about really activating those students that are okay with tolerating different ideas. One of the biggest reasons why politics is so polarizing is that we have this tribalistic thinking. And when you greet groups as groups, that only further tribalizes people and forces people into different, these are my teams. And by reinforcing those partisan labels, by reinforcing this is a Republican, this is a Democrat, all Democrats think this, all Republicans think this, by giving force to those labels, you are essentially facilitating exactly the thing that you're trying to resist, which is, tribalistic politics and, just senseless thought, right? When people think that there are, when I just brought up the example of the UC Berkeley student body. When you paint the entire thing as far left, you fail to see the nuance, and you fail to recognize the heart of the problem. Group thinking is one of the worst forms of thought because it forces people to conform to norms that they don't necessarily agree with, and it forces them to it basically prevents them from seeing that there's a lot more nuance to the world than there is. And I think that group thought is one of the threats to democracy, and we really need to do something to unhinge that tribalistic thought.